Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses, Crazy Quilting and Beyond. We're getting closer to being completed with this challenge project. Today we're going to work on expanding the seams and making them a little bit fancier on our fan blocks. In today's episode, we're going to complete the embellishment of this block. We're going to be adding some beads to give them a little bit of pizzazz. I have threaded my beading needle with 2 strands of pink nylon beading thread. I pick up one bead on my needle and I'm going to put it in the fabric just a short distance away. So I'm going to play with this one as I go. I'm going to add some lighter pink beads in, but I'm actually wondering if I want to combine 2 beads on these high ones so I can play with it and get a look for what I want to do. I think I actually like it just alternating the single color better. So I'm using pink thread on the pink bead because it helps to conceal the thread. It won't make the thread obvious. And I want to pull snug enough. And this one I got the stitch just a little bit big. The way to avoid that is put your needle down, push your bead back, and put your needle down right next to that bead. And that should hold it a little snugger and closer to the stitch. Let's see if we can do a better job with the next one. And that one we got twisted. There, that's better. I often feel like beading is the thing that just makes such a big difference in how your project looks in the end. And I am going to be threading through here. I know I'm going to be coming up right in here. So rather than just run one loose thread over the back, I'm going to bury it between the backing fabric and that. And I know I'm going to be coming up right there. By changing to the 2 colors of beads rather than just using one, it adds a little extra level of interest, especially since on this particular seam I don't plan to add any additional embroidery. So it will help liven it up and help make it more interesting so that it all coordinates well together. So I started with a really long piece of thread and I'm already through probably half of it, and I always find that beading eats up a lot of thread, so I always put a pretty long thread on my beading needle when I'm getting ready to bead. You'll notice over on the side I have my beads are on the beading mat, and that's because it helps keep them from rolling around, and I'm not likely to tip the tray as I'm bumping back and forth here. Now I could add one bead down here in the corner, but my motif is going to sit here. It's going to cover that, and so I'm not going to worry about that. I always put 2 knots in. Again, one added layer of security. So doubled thread, big knots on the front end, and double knots at the end. So on this one, I think I would like to use a pair of yellow beads. I like the way they show up on that. I think that's gonna, I think 2, let's see if we can show this where you can see it a little more clearly. I think 2 is going to show up nicely and better than 1. So I'm going to go ahead and do that along that seam, but I don't want to sew that with pink thread. But I'm going to use this one that's off-white because I think it's the one that matches the yellow rayon ribbon that we've used around the outside. So I was thinking I was going to put two there, but this one runs into the other one, and so it actually crosses over. So there's actually only room in this particular spot for one bead. So I'm going to just thread through the second bead, pop it off, and stitch down the first bead. And we're going to stitch down. So when you're working multiple beads, it's really important to measure where the beads are so that you get them to fit nicely. Otherwise they can be really loose or too tight and they bunch up. So with these yellow beads, this is actually the very first yellow that I'm pulling through other than the ribbon. I know we've talked about using many different things, what from embroidery thread to beads to possibly silk ribbon embroidery, but as I've looked at this, I think if I add silk ribbon embroidery, it's going to compete too much with the other ribbon elements that are on here. So I decided that I'm not going to be doing any ribbon embroidery to embellish these seams. They're going to take the background and we're going to let our little floral motifs that we made take precedence. And this one, I'm going to go ahead and finish this off in the direction of this seam. So I have done the embroidery across the top edge, matching whatever is in that seam. But I think if I'm putting beads in it, it's going to compete. So we're just going to leave that embroidery the way it is, and the decorative edge will only be along the front edge. I'm really tight here with my thread, but I wanted to get those last two beads in. Wow, I got both knots in, and I have just an inch or so of doubled thread left to spare. That's pretty good. So now I'm going to use some blue beads in this next block, just on these little short ones. It's just going to be the only bead I add to these seams. Is I have these little short legs with nothing on them, no embroidery or anything. And it again is just going to add that bit of interest, carry our colors through the block. So we're focused on our main themes of pink and turquoise. These are transparent beads, and so matching the color of thread to the bead can make a big difference. If I was going to use a pink thread, it would give the beads a little bit of a purple cast because of the color of the thread. So you can use that to your advantage if you want that added effect. And in a future episode, we're going to focus on strictly on beading and talk about some of those tips and tricks for getting some creativity in the beadwork that you're adding to your embroidery. I love how the beading brings the colors through and brings it to life. Isn't that fun? So now, just to give you an idea, let's put our elements on that we know we're going to be having. While it may not be the exact one that we're going to use on that particular corner, it gives you the idea. And so you can see how that goes together, and now we're picking up the colors and everything is coming through. So when I'm trying to figure out what my beading pattern is going to be, I often will sprinkle the beads out over the block and just see if something works or not. In this particular case, I'm still trying to pull this yellow through. I needed a little bit more than just in the seams down here, but I also want to make these fan edges a little bit consistent throughout, even though each of them is different. And so I think what I've decided on is I have these sort of square beads that I'm going to use as sort of a little floral motif along the top. And then I'm going to use the little yellow beads, the seed beads, to accent within the actual framework of this kind of outer lace area. And so I've done that for each of the blocks. So let me stitch it down and let's take a look and see how it comes out. So our seam along the outside edge came out great. I love the yellow and the way it pulls through the yellow of the rayon ribbon, and how the pink pulls through things like the rosebuds, and then certainly the pink that's in the other blocks as well. And here is the fan block with the beading added. I've just placed the two floral elements in place so we can see what they're like. They're not going to get sewn down because the central bird embellishment needs to be sewn down first before these can go on. So I'm really happy with the beading. I love the way it turned out. I ended up adding beading all the way around this particular part because again, that's the part of the fan that overlaps the others. It's like the front or cover of it. So I think it's working really well. I was going to add beading to some of these seams along the pink blocks, but I've decided that I really want the attention to be on the fan blocks, on the floral embellishments, and on the central bird motif. If I add more beading in here, there's no good place to really rest the eye. And I think these give just that little bit of space that your eye can sort of linger, but it focuses the attention on the more colorful parts of the block. I'm really happy with the way this is turning out. Thank you for watching today's episode of Ivory Blush Roses, Crazy Quilting and Beyond. I hope you've enjoyed seeing how these simple foundation seams can be expanded to add a little bit of interest to our fan blocks. Give me a thumbs up down below, leave me a comment, don't forget to subscribe, and click on that bell to be notified of new episodes. Have a great day, happy stitching, let's go make something beautiful.